Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the Agatha's Soul Cauldron combo deck, which is one that has been around in standard for quite some time, all the way since Wilds of Eldraine released, where we finally got Agatha's Soul Cauldron alongside the Sleep-Cursed Fairy, and these are two of the main pillars of the combo, of course, as the Fairy allows us to pay 2 mana to untap this creature. If we exile the Fairy with a Cauldron and put a +1 counter on a creature we control, we can give that creature that same 2 mana ability to untap for 2 mana, and if we now combine that with a creature that can naturally make 2 or more mana, we can potentially set up infinite mana by untapping that same creature over and over, making excess mana in the process. Now this deck doesn't necessarily want to generate infinite mana, but we do want to be tapping and untapping the same creature over and over again, because that way we can now deal infinite damage thanks to Hawkeye's bow, which is 1 mana for an equipment that gives +1 power and reach if we equip it for 1 mana. But more importantly, whenever the equipped creature becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if we can now infinitely tap and untap the same creature, we can now also deal infinite damage thanks to Hawkeye's bow. So now the most straightforward way of comboing is with Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu from Marvel Superheroes. A 2 mana 2/2 lets us activate abilities of creatures we control as though those creatures had haste. So now our mana elves can immediately tap for mana, and Shang-Chi can also make 2 mana of any one color that we get to spend to activate abilities of creature sources. So we can use that to maybe untap the Sleep-Cursed Fairy as well, and if we can combine both abilities onto the same creature thanks to the Cauldron, we can now keep untapping that same creature over and over and deal infinite damage with a bow. Another way we have of comboing is if we have 2 copies of North Pole Patrol, which is a 2/3 that can tap to untap another target permanent we control. So with 2 patrols, they can just keep untapping each other, and if one is equipped with a bow, we now also have infinite damage. Or we simply need 1 patrol in the graveyard, exiled with Cauldron, and then as long as we have 2 creatures with a +1 counter, they can also keep untapping each other and deal infinite damage. And then all the infinite tapping and untapping can also be used to draw through the deck, thanks to Gran-Gran, a 1 mana 1/2, saying whenever she becomes tapped, we get to draw a card and then discard a card. So if we have the North Pole Patrol combo exiled with Cauldron, for instance, we can now keep tapping and untapping Gran-Gran, which will cycle through the entire deck until we find Hawkeye's bow, so we can now also deal infinite damage. And then rounding out the deck, we want some more mana creatures to speed up the deck. They also synergize well with Shang-Chi, give us more bodies for Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So at 1 mana, the full set of Llanowar Elves, which can also set up a turn 2 patrol. Then the Gene Pollinator has a lot of great synergies throughout. Actually wouldn't mind more copies, but ran out of space. But this can also be a way for us to tap Gran-Gran, so we get to draw a discard with it without needing to attack, which is sometimes not possible. And then we can also maybe accomplish the same with the Waterbending ability on the North Pole Patrol, which also lets us tap down an opposing creature, so that also gives the deck a bit of interaction if we need it. So that's another awesome pairing. And then the Pollinator is also an artifact creature that we can maybe get back with level 2 from DOS Machines, which is a way for us to set up our graveyard for Agatha's Soul Cauldron. When it enters, we mill 2 cards, draw 2 cards, and then discard 2 cards. So we can maybe find the Cauldron or the bow if we need it, while setting up some creatures in our graveyard. Or we can actually leave some artifacts in the graveyard so we can get them back on level 2, which lets us return up to 2 artifacts from our graveyard to our hand. So that's where the Pollinator, being an artifact, can also come in handy. And then we also have 2 copies of Winter Night Stories, which can do something pretty similar, putting creatures into our graveyard and dig for the missing pieces. Can also harmonize it out of the graveyard if we milled it with DOS Machines. And then last but not least is Badgermole Cub, and I did try to build the deck without the Cub earlier, but it just has too many great synergies throughout, as it now lets all our mana creatures tap for 2 mana, which is actually quite relevant, because now a Llanowar Elves can potentially go infinite with a Sleep-Cursed Fairy if we have it exiled with a Cauldron, because the Elves makes 2 mana, and the Cauldron fixes the green into blue mana, so we don't necessarily need blue mana specifically to go infinite, and then deal infinite damage with a bow. And the cub also lets us earthbend onto a land, which in turn will pick up a +1/+1 counter, and any creatures with +1 counters will also inherit all the various abilities from Agatha's Soul Cauldron, so that's another creature that's primed and ready to potentially combo off. And then one final synergy, of course, is with Shang-Chi, since now Shang-Chi can actually make a normal green mana that we get to spend on casting our regular spells, as opposed to only making mana for activated abilities, so that's another important interaction to keep in mind. And then the mana base is just a nice mix of fast lands and shock lands, mostly one blue-green lands, and then just a little bit of red to be able to cast Hawkeye's bow, but we usually don't need it until later. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw. We've got a promising hand. Elves into cub for a quick start, and then those machines. Putting Patrol in the graveyard would let us potentially combo once we exile Patrol with Cauldron and two creatures have a +1 counter. One of them may be the Earthbended land. Opponent does have the Burst Lightning for the Elves. So maybe a red ramp deck of some variety, could be land destruction for all we know. Alright, so Pollinator, does it change anything? Could just play the Pollinator and a tap land, and then wait on Badger Mole. Sure. And opponent's got the hammer to deal 4 damage. Alright, found a Sleep-Cursed Fairy, so that plus Badger Mole Cub could also go infinite. So this turn I'm gonna wanna Badger Mole. And then I think we go for DOS Machines to get the Fairy in the graveyard for Cauldron next turn. And then I just need the bow to deal infinite damage. There it is. So Patrol and Fairy are good to have in the graveyard. I may regret this if our opponent wipes the board and I'm out of creatures to combo with. Although I can level this up. And there is a Pollinator in the graveyard that I can get back. Could have also discarded the bow since we can get it back later. But I might just be able to win next turn. Opponent just with a Solemn, a Ramping. Okay, so let's see. I need to play Cauldron, play bow and equip it, so I'm actually going to be 1 mana short here. Because I can both play and equip, and then still have 2 mana left for Breeding Pool to untap itself. But that's okay. Can just play a Llanowar Elves, and then Cauldron, and then keep the bow a surprise. Opponent's gonna tablet. So yeah, unless they have a board wipe here, we should be fine. Opponent is maybe looking at a land destruction spell. Yeah, that's also board wipe. 3 damage is also enough to beat the 1/+1 counter. Now I do have both Shang-Chi and Sleep-Cursed Fairy, so those can still go infinite. So that may be the plan now. Because yeah, I could untap this. But yeah, that's not gonna accomplish anything. Still have an island left at least. So I'm gonna have to level up DOS Machines to get the Pollinator, and then hope that Pollinator can go the distance. And gran-gran could also help. Yeah, I guess we'll do that. Get back Pollinator. So in hindsight, discarding the bow would have worked out better, since I could have gotten it back for free. I think I still run out 2 creatures, so we don't lose to a single spot removal spell. Alright, Capstone gets to spin the wheel here. Can they find another sweeper? Or can they just find 2 removal spells? Although Burst Lightning is not enough in and of itself, since we can still get a +1 counter. So our opponent gets a treasure. Overlord happens. Takes out Pollinator, and then now we can save Gran-Gran. And Shang-Chi is what we're most interested in. Okay, so Gran-Gran lives. Do we get to untap? We do. There's the bow. Equip Gran-Gran. And now Gran-Gran can just untap itself after making 2 mana. We also get to loot through the deck, which can sometimes be a drawback if you don't have enough cards left in library, but should not be a concern here. So yeah, just rinse and repeat, and our opponent knows that they're dead. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We've got Elves and Shang-Chi, bow as our win condition. So we're still missing a Sleep-Cursed Fairy and a Cauldron. Got a few ways to draw. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. It's definitely not a perfect hand. Facing black-white, another Elves. So next turn can go Shang-Chi plus Elves and still potentially play another 1-drop. Voice of Victory, so more of a sacrifice deck. Actually drew the Pollinator. So Shang-Chi into Elves into Pollinator. And then I can still play Hawkeye's bow. So that was an explosive turn 2. And then the fairy needs to go in the graveyard, so I can exile it with Cauldron and put the counter on Shang-Chi to go infinite. Or we can find a Banter Mole Cub, and then Sleep Cursed can combo with any mana creature. Servondam will pick up 2 +1 counters, so that can potentially interact if they find a sack outlet. Gran-Gran's nice with a Pollinator. So what do I want to start with? Does Machines, Winter Night Stories, even Gran-Gran tap with Pollinator? I'm pretty happy with all these cards, I don't necessarily want to just loot with Gran-Gran. So let's start with the Winter Night Stories. And then I'll just pay a life here to keep my options open. Okay, 1 cub can go. So yeah, if I wanted to play Gran-Gran now, I wouldn't be able to tap her right away with a Pollinator. But I can just play the Banter Mole Cub. And pass a turn. Because yeah, Shang-Chi can make a green, which is enough to equip the bow, but I would rather have this back on defense. Because with a cub, Shang-Chi also makes a regular green mana, in addition to 2 mana for abilities. Okay, opponent's got a life gain angle here out of nowhere. Okay, send Sanctifier. Well, I could try double blocking the Voice of Victory, I guess. We'll grow Servondam some more. And that's a land, which still enters untapped. Okay, so maybe start with Gran-Gran. Tap Gran-Gran with Pollinator. So we get to loot away the second bow. Can also get it back with level 2 of DOS Machines. There's a fairy and there's a Cauldron, perfect. So discard 2 cards, don't need these anymore. Play Cauldron. So assuming no instant speed removal, we have the infinite combo assembled. Exile my own Sleep-Cursed Fairy. Counter on Shang-Chi, which can now infinitely untap. And then now just make 2 mana, which actually makes an extra mana with a cub. Rinse and repeat. It's gonna take a bit of clicking here with our opponent at 28 life still. This could also be faster, although a bit risky if I just float a bunch of mana. Yeah, I guess I would have to get rid of all my floating mana first. But then I can maybe just get away with clicking 1 button. Let all the floating mana go away. I can also do that by just moving to the next phase. And then now continue comboing. So I don't have to make mana manually. I guess with the cub this is a bit more annoying, since we now have a bunch of floating mana that still gets filtered by the cauldron. So then every 2 clicks I've got a pointless click. But you get the idea. So we're just clicking the untap button over and over. And that is infinite damage. Opponent does not seem to have any response. We can also keep comboing in the opponent's turn. If I do time out, I can maybe try again in the opponent's turn, as long as Shang-Chi is untapped to begin with. But yeah, if we were playing in paper, we could just say, infinite combo assembled, do you have a response? If no, that's infinite damage. On Arena there's a few limitations with infinite combos, but luckily our opponent scoops it up here, saving us both some time. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that's mostly missing Hawkeye's bow to combo with double patrol. Don't really need much else. Yeah, I'll give it a try. Of course, still need red mana as well. Turn 1 elves can set up turn 2 patrol. Turn 3 play another one. Turn 4 try and go infinite. Alright, there's my red mana. So we're still on track to combo on turn 4. Opponent on the landfall deck. Can also use a patrol to tap down opposing creatures if they get too large. And Michelangelo, so they've got more +1 counter synergy here. Found a Cauldron, also helpful since we have Fairy and Shang-Chi, so that's another way of going infinite. Or Patrol can also set that up. Let's see. So I can maybe set up Shang-Chi to then also help pay for the Patrol's ability, since it can tap for 2. And then I could still play the Fairy, so that if I don't have to use a Patrol, I just get to untap the Fairy instead. So Chocobo getting 2 counters thanks to Michelangelo. And they're also going to use the mutagen and spread out the counters a bit. Okay, so for right now, yeah, I guess I'm still tapping the Chocobo. Take 3. And then it's just a waiting game for Hawkeye's bow. But in the meantime, Patrol offers a nice bit of interaction. So, do I play another one? Can immediately untap thanks to Shang-Chi. The elves can also immediately tap for mana. So I've got a few options here. So then I'm tempted to pass a turn here. Chocobo grows. And then we'll try to tap down the Chocobo. Michelangelo attacks. I could untap a creature, but none are big enough to trade since the Fairy is still tapped. But I can still untap the Fairy to get rid of one of the stun counters. There's gran-gran. Although I don't have an easy way to tap her without needing to attack. That's where the Pollinator can be very helpful over Eleanor Elves. But I guess never mind, I can actually Waterbend to tap down gran-gran. That's the original synergy from the Avatar set. So yeah, that might be preferable over keeping the Cauldron, we'll see. But for now I'll just pass. Chocobo 7-8. And Rhythm probably getting Ouroboros here. Yep, don't have a way to stop that. So I don't have much time, because all the opponent's creatures are going to turn into enormous threats. So then Waterbend, tap the Chocobo, make 2 here, Waterbend here. Gran-gran can go. And then Waterbend here as well. And they could still hit for 3. Now, of course, if I try and get a patrol in the graveyard, I can use Cauldron to give all my creatures that same ability, but we're still limited by how much mana we have. So, yeah, it's tough. Could try to dig for the bow now by tapping gran-gran, but if I fail, then I have fewer blockers and interaction for the opponent's turn. Can also exile the Rhythm, so they can get another Ouroboros in circulation, which may be worth it. Keep land in hand so I can loot it away with gran-gran. And then exile the Rhythm now. Ascension is mostly relevant once they can give Trample. I guess it's also just an extra attacker. Yeah, it's not looking great. But again, I just need the patrol to survive, to go infinite if I top deck the bow. So their opponent moves to attackers. I'm at 9. But all their creatures are going to get 3 additional counters, so only 1 creature is allowed to hit me. So then, with 5 attackers... yeah, I think we just let them attack as opposed to trying to tap anything down. Because yeah, if I use Patrol, tapping Shang-Chi and a land, then I'll only tap 1 creature down and only have 5 left. So I think I'm better off just jumping. Opponent goes all out. Go to blockers. So the creatures I need to keep alive are 1 patrol plus 1 other creature ideally. And I guess I can make it gran-gran so we can infinitely loot through the deck. So yeah, this has me taking 7. I can still tap gran-gran once right now. Just to loot once again. So it's possible I should have done this sooner to try and set up the infinite gran-gran on tap, because that'll eventually find the bow. And then I'll still have 1 life to spare to tap Starting Town for red. Alright, I guess I can also untap gran-gran, but that's not gonna accomplish anything right now. So I'm better off untapping the Cauldron. So I can already exile the patrol onto gran-gran. So yeah, we should have it. Despite this looking pretty dire. So now gran-gran has the untap ability. So then I could start by using Cauldron. Use this to untap the Cauldron. Get our initial loot. There's a bow. Alright, so that's going to make it easy. Play the bow. Otherwise we would have had to go through the loop a few times to keep looting with gran-gran before eventually finding the bow to keep going infinite. I can also assemble Cauldron plus Shang-Chi with a Sleep-Cursed Fairy here. So that can also go infinite, separate from the patrol combo. And now just rinse and repeat. And we've got more cards in library than our opponent has life. But I could also move the bow onto the patrol, so we don't have to keep looting. So yeah, combo established. Maybe I should move the bow just to make things a little faster. I'll just pay a mana, move the bow. And then Cauldron, exile Shang-Chi. So we have both Fairy and Shang-Chi. So the patrol can go off on its own. So we need to make 2 mana. Untap. I think if I just click the untap, it'll automatically pay for it, so saves us a few button clicks. Alright, so this is the most efficient combo we can set up in terms of actions per minute on Arena. So yeah, opponent probably dumbstruck here after setting up that massive attack, seeing us chump with all our creatures. But it turns out they actually did us a favor by putting the patrol in the graveyard. So it's very much possible I should have tried to chump block with the patrol sooner, so we could have started looting with gran-gran to be guaranteed to find the bow. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Fairy plus Cub can go infinite without needing anything else if we can exile the Fairy with Cauldron. So then I just need a bow to go infinite. Of course I don't have red mana either. I think I still play the Fairy turn 1, because it can maybe apply some pressure, and then if it dies, it's still going to be in the graveyard for Cauldron. So we do need a few pieces, but I've got high hopes. Opponent will counter the Cub here. That's not a disaster when we have 2 more. This one resolves. Now we are up against the Spelementals deck, which is kind of tailor-made to beat up on Badger Mole Cub, since they can turbo out Eddie Merc, in turn setting up their Thunderflock, which is particularly effective against Earth-Banded lanes. And now Elyush can also maybe discount a Thunderflock by 4. Found Shang-Chi. So if I get Shang-Chi in the graveyard, then Cauldron can also go infinite with Fairy without the help from Cub. But yeah, without Hawkeye's bow, this doesn't really matter. So we can just try and cast a Cauldron. Activates. I can also start exiling the opponent's graveyard if we're worried about Eddie Merc Crab, as opposed to exiling the Cub for a +1 counter to start beating down with the Fairy. So we can untap. Do I still play Shang-Chi, or do I maybe keep it in hand to discard if we find something like a Winter Night Stories, for instance? So yeah, just need the bow, and ideally a discard outlet for Shang-Chi. Opponent can still cast a 1 mana spell for free with Elyush, decides not to. Aluge attacks. So, can our opponents Thunderflock me already? I believe they can. So that would be a pretty big setback. It's going to be a flow states, which they cast for free with Aluge's discount. And our opponent passes the turn. Those Machines was a great draw. Found the bow. And double patrol as well. So double patrol can also go infinite with the bow. But let's see here. Level up those Machines. Play bow. Opponent might have the counter spell for activated and triggered abilities. And do you counter the bow? Equip Fairy. And then I can go off at instant speed. So we could wait for the opponent to tap out to go for it. And then just pass here. In case I do have a counter spell for triggered abilities to stop the Cauldron. See if they want to flash in a crab or something. They're going to consult for free. I guess we'll let that slide. And hope they tap out here. Yeah, there's a crab. They could still have the counter spell picking up Aluge. So we're not out of the woods yet, but I think it's time to try this. Target Shang-Chi. Do they have the Spider Sense? Okay, now this gets to make 2 mana. Even gets extra mana with Badger Mole. Deal damage thanks to the bow. And now rinse and repeat. Alright, so they might have lost their opportunity to respond if they had anything. And now we've got infinite damage. Can also use Shang-Chi's ability on the Earthbended lands now. But they don't have the untap ability from Sleep Cursed Fairy. So yeah, this was a bit of a delicate situation, trying to play around Spider Sense. But does not seem like they have one. Because if they try and cast it now, it's too late. The colors also don't matter, because Cauldron fixes, so the green mana can still be used for a blue ability. Opponent's hanging in there. With a Adimurk Crab on the stack. Yeah, possible they had a Thunderflock that they were trying to set up for next turn to bounce my board. Which, as I've said, is quite effective against Earthbended lands from Badger Mole Cub as well. But yeah, for opponent is sticking around to see some big finish with all the infinite mana we're generating. They're going to be disappointed, since we're just going to win the game with the damage from the bow. I think our opponent finally timed out, so we can combo a little faster here. As we don't have to wait for the opponent to pass priority back. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, missing green mana. Otherwise, turn 1 gran-gran can already maybe help us loot. And then we've got Fairy missing Shang-Chi plus Cauldron, or Patrol missing either Cauldron or a second copy. So this hand has potential, but it is also relying on gran-gran surviving and drawing some green mana. I think I can do better. Okay, so this time we've got gran-gran, Badger Mole, Cauldron, so still need some help off the top. But at least we've got our colors, Cauldron, one of our key pieces. And our opponent might be a graveyard deck, where Cauldron can also be effective at disrupting the opponent. As we already see a diamond weapon. Yeah, I'm fine just playing the Cauldron here. Can maybe attack first. And those machines is also fine. Yeah, I don't think I'll need a second gran-gran. This doesn't strike me like a deck with a ton of creature removal. But I do want to start limiting the amount of creatures in the opponent's graveyard. Town Greeter, we'll see what they mill. And yeah, it's a deck trying to power up not only Diamond Weapon, but Swarm. So they just want to have as many creatures in there as possible. For now, maybe exile the Overlord. Okay, so I can play Cub and then still do machines. Keep the Pollinator. If the board stalls out, it can help tap gran-gran as well. So then Badger Mole could still play Pollinator if I'd like. Will give me more mana next turn. So now that we found Badger Mole, I just need a Sleep-Cursed Fairy to be able to go infinite. Opponent with a Parker Luck. We found the bow and the patrol. So can I go infinite now? Opponent's got a Thunderflock, which they're also trying to combine with a Swarm, which is an elemental. But let's see here. I need to get the patrol in the graveyard, which I can with DOS machines. And then every creature with a +1 counter will have that untap ability. And then we've got the bow as our win condition. Play the bow. Cauldron. Exile my own patrol. Can target, doesn't matter, the Cub. And then equip. If I wanted to loot through the deck, we could make it gran-gran. But we already have all the pieces we need. Since we can untap another permanent. Deal a damage. Untap another permanent. And now just keep alternating Badger Mole, Cub, and Spire Bluff for 1 damage over and over. Alright, nice. So yeah, Cauldron doing a ton of work, enabling the combo, but also disrupting the opponent's game plan to an extent. But yeah, if we were using gran-gran instead, we could also be digging for additional combo pieces by drawing and discarding repeatedly. So we could also assemble the Sleep-Cursed Fairy combo, with Badger Mole letting our creatures tap for 2 mana. We don't even need Shang-Chi. Does take a fair amount of clicking here, so timing out is always a concern. But we can also keep comboing in the opponent's turn for what it's worth. But this should do it. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. I might actually want to start with Pollinator over Lanor Elves, because then I can immediately start looting with gran-gran. We've got the Cauldron, so then finding either Sleep-Cursed Fairy or a North Pole Patrol would be ideal. Opponent does have a Survivor, so that can also maybe interfere with our graveyard. Make a blue. Could also make a red here, to be fair. Find a Winter Night Stories, which I can cast next turn. So then I think I'm fine discarding gran-gran, having that potentially exiled, and then going Elves plus Bow. So our opponent on the Aura deck, the main interaction we're worried about is Sheltered by Ghosts. And I guess a Seam Rip can also interfere. And goes for the Bow, so we'll eventually need to find another one. And now the +1 counter means they can attack past Elves, enable Survival, exile gran-gran. So our opponent's off to pretty much their ideal start. Those machines could also help. So how do I want to sequence? Because yeah, the Survivor does put a weird pressure on using the Cauldron before they get to exile a key creature. Could also play those machines, discarding Cauldron, and then immediately get it back with level 2 for a bit of value. Don't hate that idea. Milled Land Patrol. And we also found a Fairy. Does that change anything? It probably does. So now I think I want to keep the Cauldron and just play it. So then I discard like a Cub, which I don't care about getting exiled, and a Fairy, because Patrol can just go infinite by itself. And keep the Story since I need to keep digging for the Bow. And then I could tap gran-gran, but since I'm happy with the Winter Night Stories in hand, I think I'm better off keeping gran-gran back as a blocker. Alright, and then I guess I can wait on Cauldron, because I don't want to prematurely exile Patrol just to have them Sheltered by Ghosts it. And yeah, opponent had a Sheltered by Ghosts. And goes for those machines, that's a mistake. But yeah, can't blame them, they have no idea what they're up against. So then Cauldron, I guess, can still wait, since we're not blocking. Take 5. And then I can exile whatever they try to exile. Because otherwise the Survivor can also potentially get that +3 and hexproof bonus. They go for a land. Yeah, I guess they can have it. I would rather get the +1 counter and the Patrol ability. So I could still loot with gran-gran here. And even untap the Cauldron, which can then still exile the Breeding Pool if I'd like. I think I still discard the land, even though it is untapped. But I just need to keep digging for my Bow. So exile Breeding Pool. Find another Patrol. I mean, I guess we're already infinite here, because we have Patrol in exile, so I just need to give that ability to a second creature. And then gran-gran gets to infinitely loot to find the Bow. I guess the only concern being I need red mana to cast a Bow as well, but we'll eventually find it. So I'll start by untapping here. And yeah, we'll start looting. Untap gran-gran. Untap Lanor Elves. Get to draw a discard. So we have the combo. It's just a matter of enacting it in time. Because there will be some clicking involved. So now I can keep the land, which helps me cast a Bow. I guess Power Bluff saves me some damage. I'm already gonna play it here. Could also technically start water bending to tap the opponent's creatures down as a form of interaction, but we just have infinite damage here. So we'll try and go through it as quickly as possible. 3 bows left in the deck. I don't think our opponent's gonna concede before we actually deal infinite damage. But the idea should be clear by now. Can also assemble a different combo with Shang-Chi and Sleep-Cursed Fairy, since we're also just drawing through the entire deck. Might have to start thinking about a contingency in case I time out. I might want an extra creature on the battlefield, so I can maybe block. But yeah, as long as I can get the bow in play, I can still technically combo in the opponent's turn. So that's priority number 1. But yeah, this is why Gran-Gran is in the deck. With the patrol combo, it draws the entire deck to eventually find our bow if we don't have one already. But you can see why this deck is probably not going to catch on Arena at least. Because while it is powerful, it's not the most user-friendly experience, which is the case with a lot of these Cauldron decks. A lot easier to just slam down an optimistic scavenger and suit it up with a bunch of auras. Alright, we still haven't found our second bow. And we're over halfway through the deck. At least the timer hasn't appeared yet, but I probably just jinxed it. Alright, there we go. Play the bow. Equip. With 22 cards remaining, I guess I do actually have to set up a different combo. So we'll go for Shang-Chi. And then I can just untap this creature. And that's going to be a bit faster than having to manipulate 2 creatures at once. Because if we needed to keep tapping Gran-Gran, we have fewer cards than our opponent has life. And luckily our opponent finally throws in the towel. So yeah, we got to see this new take on the Agatha Soul Cauldron combo in action. Shang-Chi slots in perfectly as a way to help untap the Sleep-Cursed Fairy, so those 2 with Cauldron can already go infinite, but the Patrol has also proven itself to be a valuable addition, not only as a way to combo off with Cauldron, or maybe if we have 2 copies in play, but also offering interaction, plus even another way of tapping Gran-Gran with a waterbending ability. So yeah, overall quite impressed by the deck, but of course it remains a combo deck on a digital format where it takes a lot of clicking to actually win the game. So if your opponents don't cooperate, it's very much possible that you time out or have to combo again in the opponent's turn where things can maybe go sideways. So that remains the main problem with playing these combo decks in Arena, but otherwise the deck seems pretty powerful, quite resilient, can potentially win without the graveyard, has multiple lines of victory. So yeah, overall quite happy with where the deck ended up. That'll do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.